This is totally different. This is, it's something extreme that I don't
This
know.
is totally different, says the Thai director, the winner of this year's Golden Palm of Cannes Film Festival. For him, Cannes is important and different because it opens a new chapter in his artistic career. And for us, Cannes, Oscars, and these international film festivals are important for their influence in the making of our global culture. Cannes and Oscars are strong authorities in defining a taste of good cinema and high art. For as much a lot of us want to deny that. To what extent do you rely on these international film festivals to define your taste of a good film? This is the question that I'll be asking in this edition of The Link, the show that links the news with the views. Not only that, the show that links our global audience members in Tehran with audience members in London as well as Washington. Let's get linked. Major international film festivals, Oscars, and Cannes, and their influence in our taste of a good film. Let me start off with our audience members there in Washington. Oscars just took place a while ago. My question is to one of our audience members there in Washington. To what extent do you think American audience rely on the results of the Oscars in defining their taste of a good cinema?
I believe here in the United States, there is that general tendency to rely on Academy nominations as a kind of US-centric approach versus Cannes, which seems more European.
Let me ask another audience member in Washington. How is the result of Oscars reflected or perceived in the United States?
Well, I think it's huge. For us, I work at an organization that does work on the country of Burma, and there's a film about Burma that was nominated, and it was a really big deal. Everyone was calling us about it, and I heard that people in Burma were also talking about it in their prisons and stuff, and I mean, we were sending it out over VOA and things like that. So I think in the United States, people see it as a way of like cultural, a big cultural moment for us that can be spread. And
what about Cannes? How is Cannes Film Festival and the result of Cannes Film Festival is perceived in the United States?
The results at Cannes, I think, are immense because if we don't see a prize awarded to an international film at Cannes, then the likelihood of our seeing it here in the States is almost non-existent. So it's that important that we be able to rely on the good judgment of the judges at Cannes.
Okay, let me go to our audience members in London. How is Cannes Film Festival viewed upon there in the United Kingdom? Any volunteer who would like to answer that question?
Thank you. I think actually it's the film festival itself that actually has been used this week as a platform for political activity against attacking the Iranian authorities in arresting a film director who was actually, really his case was minimal by comparison to those who are overlooked. And this privileged veto that we see is not only affecting those pictures that we may see, but those protests that we don't actually know about.
Besides a political reaction or perception of the film, I'm interested in the way culturally United Kingdom or people in British society do react to major film festivals such as Oscar as well as Cannes Film Festival. Can anyone there give me sort of a cultural explanation of the way the film is perceived culturally in the United Kingdom?
I think it's actually quite enormously important because there are some films that we probably would not actually get a chance to see or hear about or know about other cultures. Like for England, the City of Gods, which was about Brazil and corruption and crime in Brazil. I probably would never have bothered to watch that if I didn't hear about it in Cannes, and other films as well. I think it just lets you look at other cultures and see how they live and how they're feeling. I think it's very good.
If I were to ask this question from audience members in London, if you were to talk on behalf of the entire British society between Oscars and Cannes, which one is it that the British taste is more inclined towards?
I think because the Oscars are more glitzy, I think people would watch the Oscars more than they would Cannes because, you know, first of all, it's American, and second of all, it's glitzy, and it, you know, those type of films get shown in a lot of cinema. So unfortunately, I think people will watch those. But I think a lot of people in the UK, maybe in smaller groups, are quite interested in Cannes because of the fact that you get to see really great films that you and learn about different cultures that you would not get the chance to see anywhere else.
Thank you very much. Let me come to Tehran. How is Cannes Film Festival, in particular, and Oscars, is viewed upon here in Iran?
I think as far as we have a lot of artists in Iran, Cannes would be received as a, you know, very popular. Because it is more artistic. It is very popular with the Iranian filmmakers or with the Iranian artistic society. But with the, I think with the common people, usual people, I don't think that it gets that much interest because Oscars are more popular, and because of it is Americans, as she said. I think Oscars, and because of its famous film, we have two different, cinemas all around the world, Hollywood and Bollywood as the most financial and most important ones, and the French or the other cinemas are not that much popular. So it would be affected more by the, artistic society.
So you're saying that the artists would follow it, not so much the ordinary people. My question to you is, why would artists follow it? What is it that Iranian artists would get out of following a festival like Cannes? Go ahead.
I think that in Oscar we can say, for example, fame just for money and it's commercial more than another artistic situation. But in Cannes we can find some artistic position, and the valuable of that is better than Oscar, I think.
What about for Iranians? Why would Iranians care about Oscars or Cannes?
Of course, for Iranian, Oscar is so important because it's a little bit fun for them. You know, for example, the way of clothing, is a very famous person, the famous actor and actress. Okay, in Oscar, is so little bit shining. Okay. For Iran.
Let me pose the main question of the show. To what extent do you guys rely on these major international film festivals to define your taste of what a good cinema is? Go ahead.
When I watch a Hollywood film, I understand it. It's part of my life. But when I look at Cannes films, there are some specific things, some kind of film that are specifically made for Cannes, and it makes no connection with me, so I easily ignore it.
Okay, let me go to our audience members in London. An audience member in Tehran is saying that Hollywood represents the mainstream. He can connect to it. It's easy to understand, to follow the story. But Cannes is very intellectual. It represents high art. Is that how you perceive it there in the United Kingdom?
Yes, I mean, the perception in the UK is that Cannes is more cerebral than Hollywood. But you could look at it both ways. I mean, with the Oscars, it's like more mainstream, but there are more complex issues in films such as Avatar, which deal with, the exploitation of indigenous peoples, and that those issues are quite universal. And in comparison with films at Cannes would deal with the same issue, they probably affect the audiences a great deal more than the Cannes films do because more people see them.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because the perception is, or the fact is, that a film that is made or has won the Cannes Film Festival, the Golden Palm, if it gets distributed in the United States, it does quite really poorly in the box office. What do you think that explains about the taste of average American viewer? Go ahead.
Well, it's a mixed message here, and we need to look at Hollywood as a culture, as a culture of movies and production. They produce all kinds of things. If you look at Michael Moore and his films, he was resisted and heavily resisted in the United States, but still he made it. Let me connect Hollywood with other films. The films that they are being received very good in the Middle East, in Europe, outside the United States borders, because of political message. I mean, people don't want to admit that there was a killing of a whole nation, the American indigenous people. So they resist it, and they look at other things that maybe portray the Middle Eastern people or other people or African people in a negative way, that they see that this is good for them.
So essentially what you're suggesting is that Hollywood, Cannes and Oscars are in one way or another political. Is that something you would agree with, audience members in Tehran? Go ahead.
What he said was really correct. You know, we are using cinemas and all medias as the most political materials that we have. Mm-hmm. And if we are really talking about, yes, they are making some films that shows, I don't know, East people are really, I don't know, sometimes idiots, sometimes terrorists or something like that. We are not going through that. We are talking about the differences between, you know, commercial and artificial states of the cons and, of course, Oscars. We are not going through the, you know, the vision that they have through the thinking methods or, I don't know, the filmmaking methods, because Hollywood is very professional in making films. But cons looking in other side, you know, all of the art history, French cinema was totally different and totally far from Italian cinema and French cinema. Totally European cinemas was totally far from the American ones. It was more artistic, and it was not artistic. It was more near to the taste of the, you know, the taste of the art all around the world. It's better to say than artistic. But
a gentleman here quite disagreed with you. What he said was that Hollywood is quite easy to understand and quite easy to follow, yes. And what Cannes represents is too intellectual and quite high art.
Because most of the people are going to, you know, enjoy when they are watching a film. There is a lot of special effects in a film, or there is a lot of celebrities gathered together, and this film is made by a very, you know, high rank of many. It would be really interesting for every people to watch it, but not a very poor film which made by nothing, but it is artistic. Right. Because nobody is taking care of art, everybody taking care of enjoyment.
Okay, why not embedding those meanings in a better way? Why not embedding all those meanings in a way that I watch it and I enjoy it and I understand that meaning, and other people do the same? Why should we always separate these two? Say this is the commercial cinema and this is the meaningful cinema. Why should we always do this? Let's combine these two together and make one worthy, one that when I see it, enjoy it, when you as an artist see it, enjoys it very much, and you go through the artistic points and you get something and you can use it in your work in future and these things. I think we are just saying that we should follow one way, and I disagree.
She was making reference to the political agenda of Hollywood. Let's assume that her premise is right. What do you think Hollywood producers, Hollywood studio would follow as part of their political agenda when it comes to representation or dealing with this concept called Iran? Go ahead.
I think, of course, in comparison, maybe, I don't know, I think they are telling something, you know, but I think they have their own special, maybe, I don't know, audience. And I think maybe in Cannes, people are talking about something, but they made it tough because, of course, they are really professional, or maybe, I don't know, expert ones, you know, and they don't want to change, I think, anything because, of course, they have their own, maybe, I don't know, audience and so on, you know, but they are telling us something, you know, maybe political ones or maybe, I don't know, social ones or and so on, you know.
Thank you very much. There was a hand raised by a film critic there in Washington. I'm interested in your opinion before I go for a break. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to respond finally to the question that you asked us regarding whether or not American audiences watch foreign films and why not. I think a lot of it has to do with availability. Like much of our media, film distribution is part of the corporate consolidation, and the availability of foreign films and accessibility to foreign films is quite limited. Even here in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, you have few places that will actually show foreign films and those films that are shown at Cannes.
I wouldn't say that there's a problem with the accessibility. I just think that Hollywood films appeal more to Western culture. So you have these films at Cannes that have this message that doesn't necessarily resonate with those out west. I think the problem really here really is the disconnect between the two cultures, not necessarily the accessibility of the film or its artistic values. One side is higher than the other. There's a disconnect between the two cultures.
It's interesting that you mentioned this. Speaking of cultural contacts, Iran plays up very interestingly and quite paradoxically when it comes to the question of Cannes, Iran uses Cannes as a platform to represent or to promote its international image of cinema, yet believes that Cannes is a political platform towards Iranian authorities. There were quite intense mode in this year's Cannes Film Festival because of the imprisonment of Iranian filmmaker Jafar Panahi, who is now fortunately released. Let's take a look at what happened there.
اون چه مسلمه با دستگیری پناهی این حریم بین دولت و هنرمندا از میان برداشته شده. الان هر چیزی امکان پذیره.
Le fauteuil vide est celui du cinéaste iranien Jafar Panahi, qui est retenu dans son pays contre son gré.
I spoke to Javad Shamakhdari, deputy in charge of Iranian cinema, and asked him about Iranian reaction to all of this. Let's take a look.
اگر که نیت برگزار کنندگان یک نیت انسانی باشه قابل تقدیره، اما وقتی که ما می‌بینیم که در گوشه کنار دنیا هر روز حوادث تلخ بسیاری رخ میده، به طور مثال فقط یه نمونهش نزدیک 1 میلیون نفر انسان در هجوم آمریکا به عراق کشته میشن و اینها در کن هیچ جایگاهی ندارن، یا در غزه و فلسطین هر روز عده‌ای کشته و زخمی میشن، در کن هیچ جایگاهی ندارن. در حوزه سینما بالاخره یه فیلمسازی مثل مصطفی عقاد این قربانی تروریست میشه، باز در کن جایگاهی نداره، و آدم احساس میکنه یه مقدار این اقدام خیلی بچه انسانی نداره، بیشتر یه بازی سیاسی است. من با آقای ژاکوب گفتم جشنواره کن یک فضای سینمایی است، اما شما اجازه دادید که یک شوی سیاسی در این جشنواره برگزار بشه. البته آدم‌های مستقل هم تو این جشنواره هستن که تلاش کردن که این اتفاق نیفته. به نوعی همیشه تو این جشنواره‌ها یک درگیری است بین کسانی که سعی میکنن نگاه مستقلی داشته باشن به حوزه فرهنگ و کسانی که کاملا با یک رویکرد سیاسی سعی میکنن که جشنواره‌ها رو هدایت کنن و مدیریت کنن. جشنواره کن در طول سالهای گذشته چنین رویکردی رو داشته، بخصوص در رابطه با ایران، همچنان که رویکرد رو با چین هم داشته. یعنی وقتی که چین رو و ایران رو یک رقیب خودش میدیده در حوزه‌های مختلف، از جمله در حوزه سیاسی اقتصادی، نهایتاً در حوزه فرهنگی سعی کرده این رقابت رو به نوعی در جشنواره کن لحاظ کنه و با این نگاه رقابتی دست به انتخاب نوعی از فیلم‌ها بزنه که حداقل تصویری که از تمدن و فرهنگ ایرانی نشون میده یک تصویر زیبایی نباشه، یک تمدن درخشانی نباشه. سعی کرده فیلم‌هایی از ایران رو بیاره توی جشنواره و نشون بده و اگر تونست افکار عمومی رو همراه کنه بهش جایزه بده که اینها تصویری که از ایران نشون میدن یک تصویر سیاه و عقب مونده باشه. دلیلی که من با آقای ژاکوب گفتم جمهوری اسلامی شرایطش خیلی عوض شده. یعنی حتی فیلمسازان ما مثل آقای کیارستمی وقتی تو تهران با این عظمت دارن زندگی میکنن دیگه نمیدونن چیکار باید بکنن، یعنی اون سوژه ها رو دیگه پیدا نمیکنن. برای همین است که آقای کیارستمی نزدیک 10 سال تو ایران فیلم نساخته. علت اصلیش اینه که اون سوژه که دنبالش بود دیگه تو ایران پیدا نمیکنه. یعنی حتی فیلم مثل خانه دوست کجاست با اون سوژه رو دیگه تو ایران پیدا نمیکنه. چرا؟ چون روستاهای ایران دیگه اون شرایط رو ندارن. روستاهای ایران امروز همه تلفن دارن، گاز دارن، تلویزیون دارن و از شرایط کاملا برتر رو که امروز در دنیا هست برخوردار هستن. لذا اصلا سوژه مثل خانه دوست کجاست دیگه در روستای ایران هم رخ نمیده. لذا این شرایط هستش که من پیشنهاد کردم که شما اون رویکردی که به سینما ایران داشتین و دنبال این نوع فیلم‌ها میگشتین دیگه دنبال این نگاه نباشین، چون دیگه این فیلم‌ها رو پیدا نمی‌کنید مگر فیلم‌هایی باشه که کاملا دیگه دروغه، کاملا غیر واقعی هست و این دروغ بودن و غیر واقعی بودنش دیگه اونقدر آشکاره که برای خود جشنواره شما اعتباری نمیاره. پس بهتره که نگاهتون عوض کنید، بیان به نوع دیگه از فیلم‌های ایرانی که ضمنی که سیاه‌نمایی نکرده و سعی کرده با واقعیت جامعه ایرانی همراه باشه، در این حال ابعاد انسانی خوبی در درون فیلم و در روابط شخصیت‌ها وجود داره. شما بیان اینها رو پیدا کنید و ببینید. بخشی از این فضای انسانی رو ما در فیلم‌های دفاع مقدسمون داشتیم که سالها مورد بی‌توجهی جشنواره‌ها از جمله جشنواره کن بوده. یعنی ما انسانی ترین فیلم هامون توی فیلم های دفاع مقدسه. یعنی در بستر یک فضای خشنی مثل جنگ شما زیباترین روابط انسانی رو میبینی. حتی این روابط زیبا رو شما بین سرباز ایرانی با سرباز دشمن میبینی و این به نظر من اون فضای جدیدی است و گفتمان و فرهنگ جدیدی است که غرب خیلی بهش نیاز داره و چه خوبه که جشنواره کن نگاه سنتیشو بذاره کنار و این فیلم ها رو به جشنواره کن راه بده و اونها رو در بخش مختلفش ارائه بده.
Jawad Chamagdaide giving his reaction to this year's Cannes Film Festival. But let's just stick to our links room, where I'll link you with opinions and links in the cyber world. On our Facebook page, we had Majda Reza Saleh, who appreciates Cannes Film Festival as an alternative trend to Hollywood. He says, I think it's more of a representation of non-Hollywood cinema per se, than it is a service to Orientalism. Yet Hollywood movies are presented there too. Damian De Andrera sounds less appreciative of European cinema. He writes, while the Europeans try to sell us something that is bold and artistic, half of the time it's like a step into a man's home who is always boozed up on liquor and is constantly in mourning voice. In another post, he continues, the media in Europe, and especially in the US, have done a great job of reporting on itself. They have packaged it in a welcoming, harmless box. It's just another way to market. It's worked, and if it keeps working on, no one will alter it. Nadia Manzar Garcia, following up on Damian, she writes, I totally agree with your last paragraph, but still you cannot generalize, especially when it comes to art. No one can really package it in a box. No matter how hard you work on it, you cannot deny that Hollywood has presented to the audiences of the world some masterpieces in the movie industry. Amid this heated exchange of opinion, there was Yoel, who came out and said, since I grew up in a religious home, we never paid attention to any Hollywood productions, so I have no say on this topic. And finally, we have Yahya Amiri, who sent us an email with his remark. Politically speaking, they are not important and should not and cannot influence our political decisions. They're just for entertainment purposes and made by businessmen for business purposes. To add, I have my own taste and no festival is going to change that. However, I don't like Hollywood tendencies towards sexism and violence. There are lessons they could learn from the Iranian cinema, but Avatar was a wonderful movie. Inspired by Yahya's choice of film, we're doing a show very soon on Avatar, so stay tuned. Now let's go to the web world. There were so many websites on film and film festivals that makes choosing a few very difficult, but here's a few. There is offthescreen.com, where you can find a wide range of information in the form of journals, articles, and forum discussions. Make sure you check it out. There's always festival-cannes.com if you want to follow up on Cannes Film Festival's official page. And there is cinematical.com/category/Cannes if you want to read up some reviews on this year's Cannes Film Festival films. And finally, if you're interested in some conspiracy against Cannes, you can go to www.don'tgotocannes.ca, where a couple of young bloggers try to convince their readers not to go to Cannes Film Festival. Funny, but not very convincing. Now let's turn to what we're discussing next week. Legacies of the late Ayatollah Khomeini, a complex Islamic republic or revival of Islamic thoughts. For that, I'll link you with our global audiences here in Tehran, with audiences in Beirut as well as London. Like always, www.presstv.ir/the link is where you go and join our forum discussion. You can also add us on Skype. The.link2 is our Skype account. Add us, we'll record your views and run it in the show. Or simply shoot us an email, thelink@presstv.ir. Let's go for the recap of the news hour. When I'm back, I'll be joined with my guest, Professor Williman, a film critic who will join me from London. And in Tehran, I'll have Mr. Esi Niknejad and Nader Talebzadeh, both Iranian directors and producers. Exciting stuff coming along. Don't go away. Welcome back to the second part of The Link, international film festivals as authorities in defining global taste when it comes to cinema. I'm joined in this section of the program with Paul Williman, Professor of Emeritus of Film Studies of Ulster University in London. In studio I have Esi Niknejad, director as well as producer here in Tehran, and Nader Talebzadeh, commentator and filmmaker. Professor Williman, let me start off with you. A lot of critics in the past few years have spoken of colonization of Cannes by Hollywood. How much of this is a reality?
Cannes is a very complex institution. I've heard people talking in this program about Cannes, first of all, in comparison to the Oscars. The Oscars are not a film festival. They are the Hollywood-based technicians voting for their colleagues, basically, in the American film industry. They're not a festival. Cannes is a festival of sorts, which has been going since the early days after the Second World War. I would like to ask all three audiences, just to context the concept of Cannes, where did they hear about Cannes? Who informed them about Cannes? And you will find, I bet, that they will only have heard via some national newspapers or radio or very short radio or television announcements by journalists, not by specialists in cinema. They will have heard only of the competition and of the national films in that competition and maybe one or two others. They will not have heard at all about the other aspects of Cannes, which is, let's say, the director's fortnight or the section Un certain regard or a number of other more artistic dimensions of Cannes. Also, what your audience has not mentioned in relation to Cannes is that virtually all the films that are shown there this year will, within 3 years, I would imagine, be available on DVD, both in the United States, possibly in Tehran, and definitely also in Europe via Amazon or a number of other sites where one can buy these things. So the situation is changing, and the festival is indeed growing in importance to some extent, and that is visible both last year when the Thai filmmaker Apichatpong Weerasettakul was a member of the jury before he won the festival this year with his latest film. So he's a regular at Cannes. He's a well-known figure there. One has to put these things about Cannes in the context of Cannes being an outpost, in a sense, an outward projection of the Hollywood-based film industry, of the American national film industry, in line with its dominance of exhibition and distribution in Europe, throughout Europe. In England and in Britain far more, where about 90% or 95% of screen time is occupied by American product. Cannes feeds the distributors and the exhibitors, not only with American product, primarily with American product, but not only with American product. So Cannes is a maintenance organization that consolidates and perpetuates the domination of the Hollywood-based film industry in Europe. It is a festival that addresses itself primarily to professionals, to producers, to filmmakers, to scriptwriters, to agents, to financiers of various kinds, and where they make deals about what was produced in the last 12 months and what's going to be produced in the next 12 months. What we get to hear of this is what journalists choose to tell us in line with the agenda of their newspapers.
Thank you very much, Professor Wollerman. You spoke of political economy of major film festivals such as Oscar as well as Cannes. Mr. Talebzadeh, you've spoken extensively of the politics behind these major film festivals. Would you say that there's a politics at work in the way these major international film festivals define and represent themselves?
You can't separate a festival from the country that it's linked to or the continent that it's linked to. The political trends that are influential in a continent or in a country, or these festivals carry that message. They carry the atmosphere. They actually precede many events. They have a sense of what's happening in the future. This festival is a gallery of a film festival, is a gallery of films, and it has a director that cannot be separate from the political agenda of that country. And we've seen this very acutely in several cases.
But you've been quite general of that. I mean, it's easy to go around and accuse anything of being political. Would you be able to give me examples? I'm looking for specific examples. What is it about the Oscars or Cannes that would make someone like you to accuse it of being quite political?
No, I'm not accusing. I'm saying this is the nature of it. Which festival is apolitical? Every festival carries a message. It carries a trend. It's a trendsetter. It actually goes before time. It goes ahead of its time. So actually it's ahead of itself. This is what makes a festival interesting, makes it live, viable. And so I don't accuse it, but you see, and you have extreme cases.
What would be Cannes agenda when it comes to Iran, for example?
Well, in terms of Iran, Iran had its first films presented in Europe during the 8-year war we had. Actually, the 8-year war was pretty much censored in the U.S. media and European media. From what I found out later on, it was pretty much was not there. It was vacant, and Iranian films became present in the festivals in Europe, especially after the 5th or 6th year of the war, and they accepted films that were basically. That's where we got a taste of what a European festival, how it relates to an Iranian film, where the subjects were more or less secular, alienated, very topical, just Iran itself, and later on with a tinge of opposition, or criticism. Those were the ones that were better accepted. And you have this trend with Mahmoud film, Marriage of the Blessed, or the secular films by Kiarostami, which were beautiful films by themselves. They were very, they were aesthetic, cinematically aesthetic, but they were secular. And so the Europeans or the Americans would never get a taste of what is really Iranian, accepted by a wide Iranian audience and reflecting what is commonly going on.
So you're speaking of politics in terms of international relations. Let's talk about politics in art itself. Mr. Niknejad, you've been quite active in a lot of Hollywood studios, the way I understand it. Let's say I'm a filmmaker, I submit a film to an international film festival such as Cannes or the Oscars, for example, and my film does not get accepted. Does that say anything about the artistic credibility of my work?
Not really. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, first of all, you as an independent producer or director, you cannot submit your movie to any film festival unless you have, or the country that you are live, you have to present the project through the country to film festival, as far as I know. The differences between political environment and professional environment. As all we know, actually I was listening to people from Washington and London and here in Tehran, people somehow they make a mix between the art and commercial or business, which is actually is all about business, and political aspect behind artistic movie. I don't believe personally there is artistic movie or there is a commercial movie. There is a movie that people, they're gonna like it or dislike it. And nobody's gonna drag people to theater. People, they pay to go to theater. If the movie sells, means people, they like it. If movie doesn't sell, means movie didn't work. Whether you call it artistic, whether you call it any other name. That's the kind of cafeteria conversation between the two intellectual people sitting and talking about this movie trying to say this, that movie trying to say that. But me personally, I don't believe those kind of conversation. I believe movie making is about product, is about financing, is about returning
so
finance.
Would you deny entirely that there is politics at work in the way films are made and the way they're distributed in all around the world?
No, I didn't say that. I mean, I do know, as a matter of the fact, when Nader mentioned that, yes, there is a strong sense of politics behind the European Film Festival. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you can look at the recent film festival and currently Cannes. And how could you say there's no politic? That there is a one individual movie that has no practically, in my opinion, commercial value, artistic value, but it has been selected as a best movie because coincidentally, at the same time, in Thailand, there is a chaos. So if you want to connect it politically, yes, right there is a fact that you can take a look at it. Whether people in Cannes, they want to do it, Whether they don't want to do it, that's a different conversation. But in the first look, you are asking yourself, among all this good movie from the good directors, from the good producer around the world, it comes to the Cannes, and suddenly unknown movie get the best prize.
Thank you very much. You spoke of Iranian cinema. Let me go to Professor Williman. There's a lot of talk of the way Iranian cinema gets reflected, gets promoted in the international scene. You've written a lot on the link between Orientalism and the way Iranian cinema is distributed internationally. What do you mean exactly by that?
What is meant by applying notions of Orientalism strictly to Iran? It applies equally, if not more so, to Chinese cinema, to Japanese cinema, Thai cinema, and various others. Before we can, in a sense, isolate the attitudes and the attitudes towards and expectations of Iranian cinema in a place like Britain, I think we'd have to go back a while. One of your guests in Tehran talked about the 8-year war, and I couldn't agree more that that war was primarily censored by our mass media. Partly, no doubt, because we were active supporters of one side against the other at that time, and we subsequently changed our mind about this particular support system. As it is now, the Iranian cinema is very, very popular in a very small circuit, the circuit being referred to as art cinema. Art cinema grew up in opposition to Hollywood in order to try and widen the space for exhibiting films that were not made or not controlled by Hollywood. So all these other films have to squeeze into the art cinema circuit, and the art cinema circuit conducts politics in a way that is very difficult to recognize by some people, journalists and others, because the politics are conducted in the type of narrative regime, in the type of expectations that the films have of their audiences. They are not overtly political in the sense of propagandistic for a particular cause or a particular government. They are propagandistic in attitudes toward culture, in degrees of obedience to the image that's unreal in front of you. And art cinema is characterized by giving a little bit of control back to the audience over how you read the films that are put in front of your nose. And there the politics are, in a sense, about narrative regimes, about narrative rhythms, about how much time you have to figure out what's actually the relationship between the characters, their situation, their village, their landscape, all these aspects of cinema which go into a film. That's where the politics are, in the relationships, but the films don't specify them necessarily. I mean, Kiarostami is a very good example of somebody who in great detail presents these relationships, but doesn't tell you what to think of them, doesn't tell you what to make of them. And in that sense, I think the art cinema is represented in Tehran as a kind of cinema that gives a measure of autonomy to its audience. But I know that in Iran there are many films made, many different kind of films made, as is necessary for a state-funded or even privately funded film industry. They have to make their money back. Economics is a very real issue. So it's always a matter of negotiation. How far can you go in challenging people's habits of consuming films, and how far do you have to satisfy those habits established by, mostly, it has to be admitted, Hollywood and their journalistic outposts.
Thank you very much. Let's go to a last section of our show, Get Linked, where we'll have the audience members to ask each other a question. Don't go away.
We are talking about the differences between, commercial and artificial states of the Cannes and, of course, Oscars.
The results at Cannes, I think, are immense, because if we don't see a prize awarded to an international film at Cannes, then the likelihood of our seeing it here in the States is almost non-existent.
I think the problem really here really is the disconnect between the two cultures, not necessarily the accessibility of the film or its artistic values. One side is higher than the other.
I think that in Oscar we can say, for example, fame just for money and it's commercial more than another artistic situation. But in Cannes we can find some artistic position, and the valuable of that is better than Oscar, I think.
When I watch a Hollywood film, I understand it. It's part of my life. But when I look at Cannes films, they're kind of films that are specifically made for Cannes, and it makes no connection with me.
I think it just lets you look at other cultures and see how they live and how they're feeling. I think it's very good.
We have Hollywoodian and anti-Hollywoodian cinema both in America and US. But you know, what he said was really correct. You know, we are using cinemas and all medias as the most political materials that we have.
One has to put these things about Cannes in the context of Cannes being an outpost, in a sense, an outward projection of the Hollywood-based film industry, of the American national film industry, in line with its dominance of exhibition and distribution in Europe.
That's the kind of cafeteria conversation between the two intellectual people sitting and talking about this movie trying to say this, that movie trying to say that. But me personally, I don't believe those kind of conversation. I believe movie making is about product.
No, I'm not accusing, I'm saying this is the nature of it. Which festival is apolitical?
There is one individual movie that has no practically, in my opinion, commercial value, artistic value, but it has been selected as a best movie because coincidentally, at the same time, in Thailand, there is a chaos.
Cannes is a maintenance organization that consolidates and perpetuates the domination of the Hollywood-based film industry in Europe.
Welcome back to Get Linked section of our program, where we'll have audience members to ask each other questions. Let me go to our London audience members. There was a gentleman sitting at the back who had one question. Go ahead.
I just want to make the point that I think something hasn't been said enough, that both of these festivals, or so many of the film festivals, are essentially marketing devices. They're ways of festivals and professionals getting together and hyping their trade up, which is absolutely fine, but ultimately they're effective in reaching consumers because of effective marketing. And the way they do that principally, as well as by buying advertising space and so on, is by being very effective traders with the press. As a journalist, if you go to Cannes, you're treated like a king. Now, mostly journalists are treated badly, quite rightly, by consumers and professionals. But if you go to Cannes Festival, you are treated, particularly if you're British, you're treated like a king.
Okay, let me go to Washington. How is Iranian cinema and Iranian films perceived there in the United States?
I think the issue is that anytime that there's a film that's created, let's say from a director in Iran, like Panahi's The Circle, and he criticizes social issues like maybe abortion, which is an issue in the United States as well as any other country, we in the United States and abroad look at that film as a generalized statement about the Muslim world and about the whole Middle East. And, you know, when we watch a film about the United States, we don't make those same generalized statements. You know, this could be a small issue in Iran, but that's not the general consensus or the general situation. But we take these broad statements and adopt our own stereotypes to them and have this very narrow view of Iran when we see films like that.
What kind of films do Iranians have access to? What kind of films do they see? The sense is that Hollywood is a marketing tool that, because of the power of distribution, American films are seen everywhere in the world. And I wonder if that's true for Iran also. So the question is, what kind of films in general are seen in Iran? Is there access to American cinema? Is there access? I guess the question is about access to films, to journalism, to freedom of expression in Iran.
That's what I'd like to hear from Iranian audiences.
Go ahead.
My name is Talaya, and I want to answer her question as she mentioned that we don't have that much cinemas in Iran. But I would be really glad to say before your films coming on the screen, we can have them in Iran easily, and we can watch them. You know, of course, a lot of famous films officially are coming to Iran and going on the screens, and we can watch them. For example, the best example is Farhang Cinemas, is one of the famous cinemas in Tehran. Or the other films which are showing by our, I don't know, TV programs or something like that. But, you know, she asked about the taste of the films that Iranians are watching. You know, Iranians are very intelligent movie watchers, you know, and they know what they are going to find out inside of the film. It depends on the, you know, generation of the Iranians which are watching the film. Most of the youths prefer the, you know, thrillers or the, I don't know, teenage films or the action films or something like that. Most of the, I don't know, scholars prefer to see some, I don't know, social or cultural or I don't know, something that they can understand, some more cultural information about the outdoors. And, you know, we have family films all around the world, specifically in, you know, Hollywood too. It depends on the generation of the Iranians. But no, Iranians are a very, you know, intelligent film watchers. They can choose what they want to see. And they can really negotiate it well. As we have a very powerful cinema in Iran. In according and May, the other countries could not, you know, take a look over it. But we have it here.
Thank you very much. Let me give the final word to Mr. Esi Niknejad. Go ahead.
Very interesting conversation here. I think you should, and the producer of this show has to really extend this program because it's so informative, especially for myself right now sitting here and listening to all aspects and different kind of opinion. But generally speaking, I have been really fortunate to be able to work in Iran, in Washington, in London, in Europe, a little bit other countries as well. But when I really go to different country and when listen to people, it's all about entertaining. It's all about people are excited to go to the dark room of theater and get something out of it.
Mr. Taleb, your final words.
Film festivals, and particularly the one that you're talking about, provide the world audience with a chance to see encapsulated a collection of films, despite the politics and everything, and to also give you the fact that Iran is a media country. Iran, there's a lot of media, foreign media in Iran today. There's a lot of focus. A lot of the foreign powers have sent media into Iran. So Iranian audience has seen more movies probably than the American and European audience. And the ones who can speak, who are bilingual, also pick up a lot more information worldwide. So I also appreciate the fact that this program, you gave a chance for different audiences as I'm sitting in the studio to watch people in Washington and London and to hear the Iranian audience. This is the first time.
Thank you very much. I'm done with my show. I'm running out of time. This is another edition of The Link here on Press TV. The link at presstv.ir is where you can send your questions or comments. Until next time, goodbye.